Hello, everyone. Welcome to another mini marathon. We're live. I'm Captain Logan. Look, it's Austin, the Day Ghost. And Austin, what are we doing this evening, sir?
We're going to be watching The Batman.
Burn.
I can't hear that without thinking of Scarecrow and Begins.
I have the same thing. Well, in Begins, I was thinking of this show. Like in the theater, he goes,
yeah.
The Batman. And I'm like, really? I want. That's got to be total coincidence, but it's bizarre to consider that Cillian Murphy may have been like, I'm gonna say I like that TV show.
Yeah,
well, it started 4 years before that.
Kid, so it was just like...
Or no, 1 year before that. What am I talking about? Begins is 05, not 08. I was thinking Dark Knight. But yeah, so that show is not only on, but it's the intro they have.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, welcome everybody. Tonight, in honor of the new movie The Batman, we're going to do a series of commentaries with one episode from every season of the TV show The Batman. No relation, really. And obviously, we're not going to talk about that movie tonight, and we're not going to get into spoilers or anything with that. We're going to be doing a spoiler cast on Sunday. But I do have to say, and I don't think this is giving away too much about that movie, Austin, that it's somewhat ironic that we're doing the movie's namesake, the cartoon show, when it's one of the few things that I don't really see any inspiration for that movie with at all.
What do you mean? There was that entire anime section where like the movie suddenly looked more anime inspired.
It was pretty weird. Where there's this bit where Pattinson becomes Jackie Chan. And it was really strange.
It was a very strange choice. I didn't think you could get away with that in a 2022 film, but Robert Pattinson, he became Jackie Chan at one point.
Honestly, I didn't think you could get away with that in a film. For other reasons, really.
Christopher Lee could play Fu Manchu. You could get away with that back then.
I just mean that having it happen for one sequence and then get out of it and never call any attention to it is probably not a thing that you could get away with narratively in anything.
Have you never seen You Only Live Twice?
Anyway, so tonight we're going to tackle an episode from every season. We have prepared for this one. This is not a show that I know super well. I have watched the first, I want to say, 2.5 to 3 seasons real casually, and only once. So, and it's been a few years. So, like, I was watching through this at one point, and then whatever streaming service it was on, Netflix or whatever it was on, lost it, and I didn't run out and get discs, and so I just, stopped in the middle of wherever I was. So I've never seen the last couple seasons of the show, and I don't remember a ton specifically of the stuff that I have seen. So I did want to make sure and watch these episodes so that we could talk somewhat more coherently about them. What is your background with this show, Austin?
So I watched this quite a bit as a kid. It's actually really funny.
Of course, this was past my time. I was already in college at the point this show came out.
No, of course.
And I'm infamous for at one time really disliking the show. And that is not true anymore, but I had that at one time. I just didn't care for what it looked like. The whole making characters ugly on purpose thing never appealed to me, and I had a hard time appreciating it on its own terms and for what it was. The thing that won me over ultimately was the Dracula movie, because I legitimately loved that, regardless of how I felt about the rest of the show, and that made me reappraise the whole thing going back and finally looking at some episodes. But I'm sorry, what is your background?
So yeah, I liked this quite a bit as a kid. Oddly enough, I didn't like Batman as a kid. Like, there's a certain point where I kind of discover Batman, and it's more so around when Begins comes out.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, which is funny because I'm a huge Batman fan. It's like Batman Begins comes out, and I'm like, whoa, like, this character is cool. And then, like, I was just, like, reading everything that I could. And so I had that, and this show was around, and I really liked this. And then I discovered Geekvolution and Blows Himself Up Dude, who are both like, this show is trash, no one should like it. And then I felt very guilty about liking it as a kid.
Oops, sorry about that. I was mad with power.
Exactly. And I was a helpless minion. I didn't know what to do. I think I stopped watching at some point in season 4 because I remember when they bring in Robin. And I know in season 5 they do like Justice League stuff, and I've never seen that.
And the only
But
season 5 episode I've seen now was the one we're doing for today, which watched like a
mhm.
thing that could have been in nearly any season, at least post when Robin shows up.
Yeah, exactly. Um, this show, I think, is one of the first things I saw Batgirl in, and I remember really liking their Batgirl in this show.
Yeah,
And
she's
that was
great.
always the thing, yeah. And I think that's part of why I always think of Batgirl before Robin, even though technically it's typically Robin before Batgirl.
Yeah, this is the only thing I've ever seen that does that first. And
Hmm.
you know what I really like about that choice, having not actually. Well, I think I have seen the Batgirl Begins thing, but I just don't remember it because it's been a while.
Yeah, it's been too long.
But just on the face of it, just that idea, what I really like about it is you have a sidekick that actually uses the Batmotif first before
Hmm.
you get to a character who goes, nah, I'm gonna do my own thing. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
I know it hangs out with bats. Robins.
I mean, think about like any other kid sidekick character. They're like the name of the character, or at least that motif, but it's like Superboy or I don't know, Aqualad or whatever it is. But with Batman, it's like nah, it's this other kid with the only thing they have in common is that the animal has wings. That's it.
Speaking of that, because I'm watching on the Blu-ray set, so I'm gonna have to change discs each episode. But
Sure, we'll give everybody time to do that because
yeah,
folks that are doing, let me say this real quick, folks that are doing
yep, right.
discs versus HBO Max, like with a lot of things we've been doing lately with HBO Max, the order is all mucked up here and weird. And this was a show that was on for 5 seasons. For some reason, HBO Max has it listed as 4, and there are episodes that are in the wrong places even in that sequence. So it's not even that it's broken up wrong. Like we'll be watching episodes tonight past this first one that are in like the season after the one that it claims it's in Max. It's all
Oh,
funky
weird.
weird. Yeah.
One of my favorite things about this new Blu-ray set, though, is that on the back it's like featuring such legendary DC Batman allies as Robin, Superman, and Batgirl. And it's like two of those are just his sidekicks. I just thought that was really funny.
Yeah, that's really silly.
Especially because, the show obviously starts off as being like very anti all of that stuff. It's funny that that's like one of the bullet points on the back of the box.
Yeah, it does somewhat reinvent itself as it
Oh,
goes along.
absolutely.
Although I always thought that it was a much more massive tonal shift than it actually ends up being. Like, it is still more or less the same show it is at the beginning, but they just decided to start broaching things they weren't. You never thought they would necessarily do earlier on, where they stopped being afraid of Batman animated series stuff, and they just go, well, let's do our own versions of things that were there, and then they're like, let's open it up to, like, I always thought, I guess we could talk about all this stuff while we're watching the show, but I'll say this just real quick. I always thought that they maybe had like an identity crisis with this, where they were like, not enough people are interested in this show. Like, I didn't know how well it was doing, and so I always thought that maybe they decided that it wasn't Batman enough, and they had to start like cribbing from animated series and start forcing in like other DC things to keep interest in it, where they kind of caved on it. And I don't know, like the more I'm watching it, the more it doesn't watch that way. It kind of seems more like maybe the writers just started wanting to do that stuff. I don't know.
Well, it's kind of interesting. Like, if I were to do a Batman show, that's probably how I would handle the sidekick thing. Is you just kind of introduce them periodically as you go, further down the line. So I think that's kind of interesting for a Batman show.
Well, to be fair, animated series did that at least with Batgirl, and there's a lot of
Hmm.
tradition with that
Oh,
going
for
all the way
sure.
back
With
to
Batgirl,
'66,
yeah.
which introduced that character in the first place. I
Well,
always
I
feel
was
the
thinking
need
of
to
Robin
mention that because I,
Strange.
I think a lot of people
He's in
don't
it now.
realize that Barbara Gordon was actually a Bulldozer creation in the first place.
Hmm. I know that's crazy.
Isn't it nuts? And this character watches like her, but in something like slightly more serious.
Oh, interesting. Which I guess is kind of understandable because
Just
by the time I think it's around when I think it's that season they introduce her. They changed the theme song and it has the '60s theme
Yep.
it mixed into it.
And it sounds great. and we'll talk about that when we get to it. But anyway, I'm gonna accidentally exhaust everything I have to say about this before we start watching it. So let's go ahead and get into it. The first episode. So let me mention real quick that we took suggestions from nominations from the Evolution community, and we got a lot of responses. And we didn't choose this in any kind of mathematical or systematic way. We just looked up each of the episodes that people asked for and picked what we thought looked most interesting. So I made Austin a list and was like, what do you think of these? And there was one that he wanted to change, and so we did that. But this is basically the ones I thought looked interesting, plus one that Austin was like, nah, let's do this other one instead. And that's what we're doing tonight. So no real rhyme or reason to the specific episodes we're watching tonight, except we just let you guys narrow it down to a list. And it turned out to be a really eclectic assortment, and I'm really happy with it because some of this is more off the beaten path stuff, not the stuff that everybody would most expect. Like Laughing Bat is not here. I've talked about that somewhere before, I think. But like we might do another one of these down the road, and we can do the bigger episodes there. But this kind of turned into the same thing we did with the animated series a few weeks ago, where we're doing maybe one or two of the bigger episodes, but it's kind of stuff that people don't talk about as much also.
Yeah, we got a bunch of random villains that we get to look at.
And at least
I don't think I've seen anywhere else.
I think at least actually 2 episodes of made up villains for this show, maybe.
Oh, interesting.
I think, because I'm not sure if Gearhead existed before this. That's not I meant to look that up. That's not what I'm familiar with. And then the Scorn and what's the other? Wrath and Scorn. I don't know if those existed before this or if that's made up for the show.
Well, when they showed up at first, because of the color of Wrath's costume, I think it's Wrath, I was like, oh, is this Catman?
But anyway, let's go ahead and start watching it now. This has turned into one of those videos where I'm sure we'll see comments later with timestamps that are like, the thing actually begins at 12 minutes. So Q&A is the first episode in question. It is, according to HBO Max, Season 1, Episode 8. And I will keep giving you guys that because I'm sure the majority of us are watching this on HBO Max. But if you're not, just look up the actual episode number in an episode guide. Those are very easy to find, obviously, on Google, and just figure out where it is in each season. If anybody gets confused about that, I can also pull that up on my end. But I'm looking at this on HBO Max, and like I said, I'm sure most of us are thinking that way. So Q&A is the episode in question. Get it to timestamp 0. Get ready to press play when I say now, and we're just about to do that. It's good to see everybody in the live comments. We will interact with you as we go along, and here we go. Are you ready, sir?
Yep.
Let's get him. Yes. Can we please start? Here we go.
Yes.
Everybody, please press play right now.
So, not to talk about that movie again, but one person did ask if if anybody does say the Batman, like in the show, and yes, he is introduced by saying, "I'm the Batman."
And then there's that guitar sting. It's really, I guess that is the one thing they cribbed from this. No, that does not happen. That does not happen at all. So there's not one of these in the history of the world that's not awkward, right? Of ribbon
cutting?
Ribbon cutting. Especially like the celebrity ones, where you just get some washed out of work actor that like all he does now is cut ribbons with giant scissors to christen. I've never fully understood what even is the point of the kind of stunt casting thing with that.
When this started, I was like, oh, hey, it's Fred Willard. That was not what I was expecting to see on this first episode.
I don't know, how much extra interest do you really garner by having a, really minor celebrity or somebody nobody's thought about in 30 years, come out for your opening ceremony for opening your store?
I guess
really weird teaser, too, right?
It's very strange. This episode's very goofy, and not even in a bad way.
I love it.
Like how goofy it is.
I like this one a lot. So one thing I gotta mention real quick is, and by the way, I love this intro and always have, and I like them both, I think, equally for different reasons. Like, I don't mind the changeover at all, but I like the kind of moody, understated thing that this does, as opposed
Yeah.
to the more surf rock thing that we do with the second intro.
Well, this is what I think of with this show. I was actually really surprised because I didn't know that it changed.
Oh, you didn't? Interesting.
Yeah, I didn't remember that.
Because Eric and I made you stop watching it before you got to that point.
No, I was in a bathroom crying as a little child, and I was like, I can't watch it anymore.
I always thought it was really strange that it goes to black and you think you're about to get a commercial, and then there's a couple more bats.
Well, if it were a show now, the bat part would just be the introduction. It would say the Batman.
That's all
the
you
Bat's
get. That's
quiet.
exactly
That's
right.
all
Yeah.
you get.
Your intro music would be.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, what I wanted to say about that teaser is it's really hilarious that every time one of these pranks gets played by Clue Master, you have all these people around just laughing at what very easily could be a kidnapping plot or something.
Especially with the chess one.
It's really screwed up, and just everybody's. I'm like, I don't think that would be the natural response of most crowds. I think people would like gasp and be like, "What is happening?"
Yeah, it's
Because
like everyone in the crowd is me.
yeah, because exactly, because they don't seem to think that whoever is having this prank played on them is in on the joke. It's not that thing.
Well, people who are in for opera wouldn't be into this kind of humiliation. I wouldn't
No,
think.
that's true. But this is also maybe the point that this episode is trying to get at is that like highfalutin high society people actually like lowbrow campy humor just as much as the rest of us, because we also find out that Alfred is into game shows, and I don't buy that either.
What do you think of Reno Romano as Batman, Cap? What?
I thought you said Ray Romano. And then I realized that you didn't say that. Is that the voice actor? I don't even know. I don't even know this actor. I thought you said Ray Romano. I was like, he does kind of look a little bit. He's like a cross between Jackie Chan and Ray Romano.
No, he's actually one of my favorite Spider-Man voice actors. So
What
it's a little
Spider-Man does
strange
he
to see him
voice?
as Batman, but I also think he works for their take on Batman. Because he is a bit more quippy.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's not as broody. What's interesting about this show is that it's dark and it's not dark, and it's an animated series and it's a cartoon. You know what I mean? Like it's very much a walking contradiction in a lot of ways. Like their characterization of Batman is more or less standard in the way everybody talks about him, but the way it's presented to the audience, he doesn't seem like real conflicted and broody and
Yeah, it's almost like the animated series is the Burton films, and this is the Schumacher films.
that's a really good way to put it. Yeah. And I mean, it's not even a Batman that's like constantly smiling or anything, but he doesn't have like that look of sorrow in his eyes at all. You know, like he
and
does seem
he like walks around and just has one-liners.
he's the most well-adjusted Batman ever. I think is maybe the way to put it. And yet he still has that like all business kind of thing. And like this episode is all about how you could have very easily done the same episode. I mean, it wouldn't have been as goofy maybe, but you could have done the same skeleton of this episode in animated series. A show about a Bruce Wayne who didn't have a childhood, it wouldn't let himself have a childhood, who goes up against a villain who never grew up. That's super interesting. And the big difference between this show and animated series is, and the reason I find that show more sophisticated, this is just of a different color. It's not better or worse. It's just not as much what I go in for with Batman. Typically,
Yeah, I think it has that for both of us. Like, this isn't our Batman, because we have very similar takes on Batman, I think.
Well, this feels like it's skewing to a somewhat younger audience, right? So, it will like suggest or introduce these really super interesting ideas that it doesn't then explore quite as much as animated series would. So like my analysis of like my analysis is the same thing as my observation with Batman had no childhood, goes up against a villain who never grows up. That's kind of where it ends. Like that's what it's about, and that's about all you get. But it's a really interesting notion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure.
So one of the reasons I wanted to pick this one is I personally am a big fan of game shows myself, and the idea
The
of
second I started it, it was like, oh, this is why Cap wanted to do Q&A.
the idea of Batman going up against because like evil game show host is the obvious way to go, but instead it's a evil game show contestant who was too smart for his own good and who is from his perspective, and it seems to actually be true. I think he has a beef. From his perspective, it was basically like if Ken Jennings on Jeopardy was forced out because he was there too long. And so he gets a really hard question when somebody else gets too easy of a question. And once that's revealed here in a second, you can kind of see the host and the producers looking at each other like, oh no, he's found us out. Like, it's pretty clear that he's got a real, actual disgruntlement. And I think that's a really hilarious idea, just for a villain, in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. I like that he starts off as the professor from Futurama's like younger clone, because that's just his voice, and then he turns into like Jabba the Hutt, the Blob, and like the original Kingpin, like all merged together. It's awesome.
Yeah, and most of the villains in this show are kind of full-on reinventions, very often with totally different backgrounds and sometimes entirely new motivations and even different takes on, what the motif is in the first place. And that is very much the case with Clue Master here, because this guy's not going to be Stephanie Brown's dad. There's no way that
this guy's not going to be anyone's dad.
That he had a relationship with anybody. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. Is Clue Master in the 60s show, Kev?
No.
I wanted to ask you that. No?
Which is kind of surprising because there are a bunch of Riddler clones in that show. There's so many villains in 60s Batman that are basically just, not Riddler. Where it's like a second or third string kind of version of that, where they basically are leaving Riddle-like clues, but they just are, slightly off the beaten path. Kind of surprising that Clue Master is not one of them.
And it's interesting this show went to Clue Master before Riddler.
Sorry, say that again.
And it's interesting they went to Clue Master before they went to the Riddler in this show. Because they are very similar in that, the kind of asking the questions stuff. Obviously, it's not the exact same. But,
well, and in fact, in some ways, they're opposites. I really like looking at these as companion pieces to each other, and was kind of glad that we watched them back to back, because I don't know how much of that I would have picked up on. Watching the Riddler episode, the first Riddler episode, as a follow-up to this, and we'll get to that when we get there here in a minute, is interesting because this guy is not, obviously totally different motivations. He's going to get beaten at the end of this with a question about Batman's secret identity, and trying to get to Batman's secret identity is what Riddler's after in the first place.
Clue Master also has his awesome henchmen, which the Riddler does not have. He does not have small headless people that run around kidnapping people.
People are complaining about lag. I apologize for that, folks. I'm not sure what the problem is with the connection tonight.
Yeah,
we've been having some of that lately, and I thought I fixed it. I actually worked on that earlier today, trying to make sure that...
You're slaving all day in the kitchen trying to fix up the lag.
Trying to make sure that my my satellite down here was connected properly, and it seems to be now. So we should have a booster, but
Unfortunately, the stream is a little pink in the middle.
Brian's that's hilarious. Brian in the comments there says they probably weren't allowed to use Riddler at that time. I don't know because I mean, it's the very next season, and it's not too many episodes
Normally
after. But
that happens when that character's in like some other media.
yeah,
That's why I don't think they could use.
and there wasn't
Scarecrow
really anything
spots.
thing right then.
Yeah, exactly. So strange when you think back to that, where it's like, oh, you can't use this villain because it's in this movie.
Yeah. Well, and it's also weird when studios will still sometimes have that same very antiquated logic with things. Because you still see that on the Warner Brothers side some.
Yeah, but at least with like animated shows like this, you would think that because they obviously aren't connected, you would think that it would just get kids more interested in both.
Yeah, if you're already using the show to sell action figures, why can't you use it to sell another movie?
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, the other thing that's interesting in comparing Cluemaster to their Riddler is that, well, and I mean also contrasting, one of them is not a physical type at all, and their Riddler is kind of watches almost as much of a fighter as he is a thinker, which is kind of unusual for Riddler. But they have a much more physical Riddler in this, and this guy's not that obviously, but. One thing that's really interesting in comparing them is that this is a guy who's obsessed with proving to everyone how knowledgeable he is, and Riddler is about figuring some stuff out.
Another big thing I was thinking of with Cluemaster in this is that he looks like the Boogeyman from...
That's what Lucas Green just said. Oogie Boogie
Oh.
from... yeah, that's hilarious. From Nightmare Before Christmas.
Thing on the top of his head, especially in the drawing that he has of his face. It looks like that. If only he spun a die.
So this is a really weird commercial break, because he's like, usually we'd cut to a commercial from our sponsor, Don't You Wish, and then the show does do that. I just think it's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's a Simpsons joke.
But usually, even with something like Simpsons, we'll do a meta thing where, like, the animated series did that too, when, like, Joker takes over the airwaves, and it's like, we'll be right back, and then we cut to actual commercial. But there it was like, we're not cutting to commercial, but the actual show does, so it's almost like an anti-meta thing? I don't know. AMC also thanks guys for picking so many of my suggestions. In fairness, I suggested a ton. I love the show and was psyched that you'd be covering it. And there was a lot of duplicates, too. And I will say that a couple things I looked at quicker than others because so many people suggested them. So, like, if they had more, a larger count, I was looking at those synopses first. So that certainly affected the order a little bit, or the choices a little bit.
Yeah, because when I put them all together into like an actual list from all the suggestions, and I made sure to put how many votes each got because I figured that would play an
Yeah, thanks for doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you were super helpful with all that.
I don't want to complain about the audience, but some people were very easy in giving season and episode numbers. Others not so much.
So yeah, it is silly. This guy seems to know everything. Like, just, his breadth of knowledge is kind of ridiculous. But maybe he's also just really good at memorizing things and has a eidetic memory or something. Because, to be fair, he does just give them... he does just give them books and say you can pick anything out of this. It's like, well, he's memorized all of that.
Yeah. I also think the part where he asks Batman to ask him a question is very The Hobbit. You have the scene with Gollum.
Oh, sure.
Bilbo doing the riddles,
You know what he
and
looks
he
like?
basically cheat on the last one.
He looks like he should be running a guillotine.
Oh yeah,
Right?
absolutely.
He's an executioner.
He
Maybe
should
that's
have
somewhat
the
on
ropes
purpose.
holding them up in a guillotine, and then it'll cut those, and then they'll fall into the acid.
I didn't notice that his henchmen have no eye holes.
No, I know they're awesome. They're so strange.
It's bizarre.
They're just little people with like tarps over their heads, and I like that they're all numbered.
I like how and this is where I get off saying that the show is a really weird walking contradiction, and I think that it's the thing that works about it, where simultaneously this is a pretty cheesy premise, or maybe cheesy is not the right word, but like it's goofy. This is one of the more kind of Saturday morning cartoon type villains and concepts of the season, I think. And yet this whole situation is really sadistic.
No, it's kind of an update of 66 in that way.
Yeah,
In a different way than
but it doesn't
Brave
feel like
Bold
full on
updated it.
parody so much as it feels like it's for another audience. But then there's this weird edge to it, where like
Yeah,
it knows
it's
who it's
like a
for.
weird
Whereas the
update
animated
of
series was like
66,
for
but yeah.
everybody and almost didn't care about the 9-year-olds. This is like talking up to the 9-year-olds, but it's more
Yeah.
for the 9-year-olds.
Yeah, and I feel like, Brave and the Bold, of course, famously was the creator being like, this is what I thought 66 was like when I was a kid. And this is almost like updating 66 while making it slightly darker, but it's still that kind of like sillier Batman in a sense.
Tom, I have not looked up who's playing Clue Master, but I'm pretty sure that's not John Delancey.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I can look it up, but it doesn't sound like it.
That's the Q guy from Picard, right?
Stop it. I quit. I'm done.
Hey, maybe in Picard
Michael
they'll introduce A
Boston?
and have Q and A. Yeah, when they start fighting, when I watched
Glenn
it in
Shadix,
preparation.
which is not a actor I recognize.
In preparation for this, when I was rewatching this episode, I
Yeah.
was like, there's no way they can get me to buy that Batman can like struggle to fight this guy. And the second he kicks him and his like foot sinks into his stomach, I was like, nah, this is great. I'm with you, show. I'm with you.
I also like the more absurd way that, because most Batman villains are in some way like a dark mirror for Batman or like an anti-Batman, and I like the really like absurd, goofy way that guy is that, where it's like, here's another really antisocial person like Batman kind of is. Like we deal with how like cut off from the rest of the world Batman is in this, and the thing they have in common is that they both kept to themselves and didn't intermingle in society enough. But again, one had a childhood and couldn't, get past it, and another one refused to ever have a childhood. And so he's like the opposite of Batman, but a dark mirror for Batman in a really silly sort of way.
Well, and Batman became the like.
If Batman just got really reclusive and into himself and did nothing but watch game shows after his parents died, like that's who he could have been.
Well, Batman became like the peak like of human physicality. Well, that guy ate so much chocolate that he became 12 feet tall and like a giant ball of fat. It's the opposite of Batman.
I also like that the game show, we're past the episode now, but I just had a couple more things I wanted to say real quick. I also like that the game show is essentially Jeopardy. Like, they're very clearly, thinking of just that show. And the sense I get is that their take was, well, instead of making him another Riddler type where he's giving clues like riddles, he's the clue master in the sense of, like, Jeopardy clues.
Yeah, instead of riddle me this, it's riddle me some.
It's like, you know, you have to ask it in the form of a question.
Yeah,
But thank you for
exactly.
playing.
You've made yourself look like a jerk in front of millions of people, Clue Master.
You don't even get a lousy copy of our home game. Oh, I also like
You're a
that,
complete
speaking of that, I
loser.
also like that he gets a consolation prize. Where he basically gets,
Yeah.
like, Little Debbie snack cakes for the rest of his life. And he's like, these are still delicious, but it wasn't fair. And I also
Yeah,
like that he's
at least he
so out
enjoyed
to...
them through his life.
I also like that he's so out to lunch that he also blames the person that beat him, who was not in on the conspiracy if it was a conspiracy, and couldn't have helped that whole situation at all. And, like, I kind of cried foul on that for a second, and then I was like, no, this guy's a lunatic. And also, halfway through the episode, I was trying to figure out how it was really anything like a traditional Batman villain, because I was like, well, it's just this disgruntled guy who's taking things too far. Like, he doesn't seem like an Arkham inmate type guy. And then he totally gets there.
No, attacking the people who actually harmed you, plus like just the people who were just there, is very much like a Batman villain move.
Yeah, apparently the lag is still happening, but they said that they can hear us okay. And that's good, because these are essentially podcasts anyway. But my apologies for that. I'll look into things and see what's going on. I might restart. Well, no, that's not really going to work, is it? Because I'm not thinking straight, because I would have to keep OBS running. I was gonna say I might at the break restart my machine, but I don't think I can do that without starting another video. Anyway, let's go ahead and set up the second episode, and then I'm trying to decide if we should take a break after that or after the third one, because we're doing an odd number tonight. Maybe we'll go ahead and just take a break after that second one, since we had a real lengthy preamble for no good reason.
Yeah, that was basically our first episode.
The next episode is Riddled, as aforementioned. And let me figure out where that is according to Max, while Austin goes and gets his discs. I really wish Max was a little bit more sensible about how they set up some of these shows. Because I think this one might be listed as a Season 1 episode. And is just put in a really bizarre place. Yeah, this episode on Max is Season 1, Episode 15. So it's in between Cat the Bat and the Ugly and Fire and Ice.
That's so weird.
It's very strange.
I'm shocked that this show went back to like a pre-animated series, Mr. Freeze. I wouldn't have thought anything would go back to that.
I'm not, because it seemed, especially with villains that it introduced in that first season, it seemed desperate to try to set itself apart, which I think was one of the things that really put me off when I first watched part of this when it was on. And I was somewhere, like, I will admit that, again, it was hard for me to take it on its own terms because it wasn't what I was used to. I mean, that's obviously part of it. But I also felt like it was trying really hard to be as not Batman as possible. Where, like, not just, I don't want to look like animated series, but I don't want to look traditional Batman at all. I've got to reinvent it. And so it's got to go too far in the direction of not being Batman at all. And the only way to do that, especially after animated series, is to try to. This was what I was thinking back then. You know, in college, I was thinking, well, I guess if you dumb down all the villains and you make everybody as unsophisticated as possible, you separate yourself apart that way. And the more of this show I've seen, the more I've realized that's not really what it was doing. But I think part of my problem was I just watched some of the worst episodes of that first season and didn't see any of the good stuff.
That's fair. I think with Mr. Freeze, though, it's like we're so just attached to that version now. It's weird to think of a time where, or maybe not even just that, but just to think that we'd ever go back to something before that.
Yeah.
Also, chat's saying the lag is better.
Oh, that's good. Well, it's probably better now because I'm not playing a show at the same time. That seems to be the thing that that
Oh.
makes that happen. Is I've just got too much going on my machine at once. So maybe it's not even a connection issue, like a bandwidth thing. It might be a machine performance problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't had that in a really long time. Like, this was happening when we first moved into this house. When we did the 24-hour stream, I had that issue. But I haven't had it in, like, a year and a half or better. So
Yeah,
I'm not sure what's causing
you're
it.
on year 2 without any lag, and now all of a sudden it's back.
Yeah, it's very strange. But yeah, I mean, when you say we were really attached to that Mr. Freeze, that was the thing that got most anybody attached to Mr. Freeze, like, as a character. Like, I think before that, he was just, like, another fun entry in that stable, but didn't really stand out to a lot of people.
Unshelled Pity, how dare you? I will not agree with that. Killer Croc is definitely better in animated series than this. I haven't watched any of his actual episodes in years, but he is in our last episode, and he's the
Just
thing that I
briefly.
don't like, where he's just a giant lizard. But sorry, I got very offended when I saw that, and I couldn't hold off to answer that right now.
Let's go ahead and get into the next episode, and again, forgive the lag if that keeps happening. I will try to somehow get that fixed before we do another one of these streams. Riddled is the episode in question. HBO Max. It is listed as Season 1, Episode 15. This is a Season 2 episode. And it watches like it must be after Yin lost her partner, which hasn't happened yet at this point in the series, so...
Isn't that the end of Season 1?
Yeah, and this is a Season 2 episode. That's what I'm saying, is that it's really weird.
So like they put it... Oh, okay.
It's weird if you watch this in the order it's on Max, because I'm pretty sure he's written out of the show at this point. Or hasn't been yet, but we're watching an episode where he has. It's weird.
That is weird.
Yeah, Jack Napier, which is a name I don't recognize. I mean, I recognize it. I know where it's from, but I mean, in the, the folks in the chat. But he says, anybody here watching the new Blu-ray? Austin got the new Blu-ray.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
Austin told me something weird about the menu.
Oh, yeah, so the menu of the show on all of the discs has like a riff that like plays over the menu, and I was like, that's weird. That I do not associate the show with that, because I didn't know about the theme change. And then, but I also, thought, like maybe the theme changes at some point later on. And then when I got there, it does have that riff, but it's like mixed in the background.
Yeah.
Like there's another riff that plays over it.
Yeah, no, it's not the
more
main melody. Obviously, it's a backing track. So on
Exactly.
the menu, what is the track then? So it's not that theme? Like, did they just pull the
It's
60s
just that
Batman
backing
theme?
track.
It's just the backing track?
It's just the backing track.
That's really strange.
It's very weird.
And I really
'Cause
like
when
that
the
guitar
theme
melody. It's
changed,
kind
I
of
was
sad.
like,
It's kind of weird that's not in there.
yeah, no. When the theme changed, I was like, oh, okay, like, that's not the theme though. And then I listened closer, and it's like, oh no, it's in the background of it. That's so weird.
Yeah. Brave and the
Like,
Bold
you
also
do
uses it.
WB. WB had no files left from the show except for that one backing track. And they're like, oh, put that on the menu.
You could have just ripped it from the intro and just used the whole song. No one would have begrudged you that. You know what would also be nice? If Warner's would stop using those really hideous, scaled-back menus. Are they still doing that? Where they just have the, default buttons?
Yeah, and it's just like a still image of Batman, like,
But I mean, like the
with like the little
the
default
buttons for each
button.
episode in a lot of box sets I've gotten in the last I don't know, decade now. They'll have like just a default play button next to things that looks like it was made in like Windows DVD Maker or something.
Yeah, the menus here are basically the exact same as the animated series Blu-rays. So yeah, it's like that.
Anyway, let's go ahead and get into this one. So Riddled.
That's enough of the review of the menu.
Exactly. Get a timestamp 0, get ready to press play when I say now. We're going to watch this episode, and then we'll take a little break. Here we go. Everybody, please press play right now. And unlike animated series, I guess this maybe kind of goes without saying, but every episode of the show has a teaser.
Mm-hmm. And Bugs Bunny.
And well, yeah, but I mean, most Warner shows were doing that. But I just mean that we didn't do that in DCAU until I want to say Justice League. I think I'm right about that, where we had teasers before we got to the intros.
Oh, okay.
So this is another episode with an interesting juxtaposition of a villain plot, and here we have a villain that's actually menacing, and who's not as silly as the last villain we just had. But
which is funny because it's the Riddler who struggled to break past that for a long time.
Yeah, and this feels in some ways like a proto-Arkham Riddler to me.
Yeah, I can see that.
But it's interesting that he's as sadistic and genuinely menacing and not really goofy as he is, but we still have some really cartoony elements, like the chief of police is a complete buffoon.
Mm-hmm.
And can't solve any riddles at all, no matter how obvious they are. There's this great bit toward the end where he's like, ancient things inside me, how did you get museum out of that? And I'm like, wow, how did you get to the position you're in? That's amazing.
Well, he's Gordon.
I was gonna say he's dumber than that, Gordon.
Like I said, it's the Schumacher movies. He's Gordon.
I think he's even dumber than that, Gordon. Well, okay, he's right in line. You're absolutely right. So again, into season 2, we've still got the same intro so far.
Batman.
Yeah. My favorite thing with him is still Batman Forever. Go!
Well, it's also Batman and Robin when he walks in and he's like, Batman, how could you let them get away?
I think another way to classify this show, just priority-wise versus animated series, is that animated series feels like a show with a real specific aesthetic that ended up being wonderfully toyetic, and this feels like a toy commercial. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it does feel like a show that was intentionally creating things that would look great to sell action figures with. And if you don't believe me, just note that in the intro, there's a huge emphasis on gadgets.
Yeah, this version's got a lot more like high-tech stuff. Like even all of his gadgets glow blue.
Yeah. So people always have to remind me that this is Robert Englund, because I just don't hear that when I hear his voice. But keep in mind that this was, because a lot of people are surprised by stuff like that, and it's super neat casting, but it's exactly the kind of approach that we have with the animated series, because you've got Andrea Romano still with the show. She's one of the only holdovers. And she's still casting and voice directing, and so she's still, even though some of the voices she gets here are intentionally more cartoony because the show goes to those places in a way animated series didn't, she'll still go to actors before she goes to voice actors, trying to find somebody that just sounds right for the part, as opposed to just going to the well of voice acting. So it's still that really kind of counterintuitive in a wonderful way approach to voice casting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's cool. It's maybe not as cool of a casting choice as him as Scarecrow in Injustice, but it is a really cool casting choice. Hot take, I actually, because he's in Spectacular Spider-Man as the Vulture, and I think I like him here a lot more than that.
Oh, interesting.
Not that he's bad as the Vulture, but he's also a very traditional Vulture.
AMC Comics making fun of Movie Gordon again. Yep, definitely a suicide. Sky is green suddenly, which is unusual.
And the sky is gray.
This is another show that usually goes for the red sky. which is an aesthetic that fits this super well, and I like an animated series when we use it too, but this has a gothic look that fits really well with that. Here we are trying to reinvent the question mark. Blue Dragon 5, to be fair, they did not sell enough of those gadgets.
Oh.
But do you agree with me that there's maybe more of an emphasis on toy selling with the show, or am I totally off base with that?
I've never thought that, but I don't know. I just think of this as because there's a certain point where like every show looked like this.
Yeah, that's true too.
And I always just think of it as like this is, we're about to get stuff like Spectacular Spider-Man in a few years and Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
Well, and it's important to note that the reason that their Bruce Wayne looks like Jackie Chan is because the model,
the same people, right?
the guy that modeled that was the guy who created Jackie Chan Adventures.
And that is one thing, and it works with Spectacular really well, is that the designs aren't super complicated, so they're a lot more fluid when they move. So
Yeah,
you get a lot more
that's true.
like characters just like dashing around when they fight.
Well, and that was one of the big accolades that people gave the show when it was on compared to animated series, is that at least, like you said, the action is more fluid and the fight scenes are more fun, and this is a more action-driven show, so that's appropriate, and I don't think that should necessarily be a slight against the animated series because it wasn't as much of an action-driven show.
No, I think having a Batman thing that's more detective-y than an action thing is a perfectly valid take. I mean, it's what I prefer. But
I mean, if you're going to be more action-driven, you'd want to make the steps. You'd want to take the steps to make those things seem more thrilling.
yeah, when you know what you want to do for it, you got to make everything work to fulfill that role.
Yeah, whatever it is. And
Yeah.
I feel like for lack of a better way to put it, the more lumbering kind of action that you get in animated series is frankly more realistic.
Yeah, like that's a show where Batman can struggle fighting two guys.
I mean, I would say that's a show. I guess the terms I'd put it in is that's a show that's more heightened, and this is a show that's more stylized. I mean, they're both heightened, but you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
that feels like an animated version of something somewhat akin to the real world, except it's kind of out of time. And this is this doesn't look like our world at all, really.
Yeah. Well, it's more of like a ninja-y Batman in that way.
This show.
Yeah. To be Batman of animated series. Like this is more Caped Crusader, while that's
Dark Knight Detective.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't
Exactly.
care for Riddler's look in this?
It's strange. I don't know. I'm not entirely sold on it. Just like the long hair and the outfit.
Is he just a
but-
big fan of the Crow? Like, what's with the face? Like,
Yeah, I'm not entirely sold on it because I always think of the Riddler as more of a geek. So that's obviously not what they're going for, and I can't harp on them for not.
but I like that he's not a
going with
geek
that.
because it would be weird if their Riddler felt like a ripoff of Clue Master.
That is true. That
You know,
is
like if you've
absolutely
already
true.
done that, I mean, it seems like they're
And the Riddler's more physically imposing.
yeah,
so-
exactly, and has some real gravitas, I think.
No, and I think Robert Englund's great in this. Like, he really sells it.
There's no. This is a trope with Batman sometimes. That just went to 88 miles an hour. I just want to point that out.
Yeah.
Um,
Nope, I know.
There is no attempt to explain why Batman is good at riddles. He just is.
I also thought rewatching this last night, I was like, that's really funny that you just hit a certain point where they're montaging all the riddles that they're solving, where it's like he's put up bombs everywhere, and then you get to a point where it's like he didn't though. This is all wasting their time, and I thought that was really cool.
That's true. I mean, Batman has to solve the riddles for pretty much everybody in this. Like, even when Riddler thinks that Yin has done it, it's Batman that gave it to her, I think. And I just don't know why he's so much better at that than anybody else, because he doesn't seem as much like a detective in this show. And I don't know where any of his training came from, and he relies so heavily on gadgetry. That, like, that's one of the things that's most Saturday morning cartoon about this, is that the answer to why he's so good at things is his name's in the title. And so, like, it's just a conceit that he's, like, if this Batman pulled out a little, like, palm computer that answered his riddles for him, it wouldn't bother me, because he's got the Batwave. I don't know how that thing works. It just goes off and he goes to crimes and don't ask questions. Like,
if anything, he should just have, like, the Bat Google, where you can just type in the riddle and get the answer. But yeah,
Chewbacca's Lover, we're watching the first Riddler episode. It's Riddled, which is in the second season, but if you're watching on HBO Max, they threw it in the first season as episode 15.
But it seems like he is more so just good at doing this because it's Batman, and we need him to be able to do this, because that's his entire thing with the Riddler.
Okay, so that is such a 60s Batman answer to that clue. Why is there green gelatin? Because he's leading us away from the main course.
Well, we're gonna get like a 66 death trap at the end of this.
Yeah. But these kinds of, like, only one possible answer sort of things, where it's so vague and obscure it could be 95 other things.
Yeah. No, this fits into what I said with the Clue Master thing, where it feels to me like an updated 66.
And again, I don't want to give away anything about the new Batman movie, but that's a thing that they really get right with the riddle thing.
Is what, sorry?
Where there are, there's not always one possibility for, like, an answer to things. Like, you have to noodle it out and see if the thing that you're thinking of is, like, we don't do that enough in Batman stuff.
Well, I was completely shocked when he asked the one riddle and Batman goes, "A sparrow with a machine gun." And Riddler's like, "That's correct!"
It's the only possible answer.
I don't know how you got it.
Somebody described this as Riddler's goth look, and I agree and think that that's a thing that kind of dates the show a little bit when they go to places like that.
Well, Riddler's not going through a phase, Mom. It's
that early 2000s edge. I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
I said Riddler's not going through a phase, Mom. Yeah, somebody said his design was inspired by Marilyn Manson, and yeah, no, you can definitely tell.
Well, are the question marks tattoos, or does he just paint that on himself every morning? Like,
I was
going all the way down his arm. What was that?
I was wondering that too. Is it even like a sleeve? I'm not entirely sure.
No, it's part of his outfit. How does that work? But I love comic book crap like that. It makes no sense. You couldn't begin to cosplay it.
Double-sided tape that he needs to put that outfit on.
How would it work? Because, like, he's got these strips that are somehow connected to his hands. What, is he pasted on himself on a daily basis?
And he's got a ton of double-sided tape.
Yeah, I have this with a lot of villains in the show, where in a vacuum, I don't like this look. In the show, it just fits fine. Like, I don't like their Joker look on the face of it, but in the show, it's fine. Like,
I think their Joker is DJ's favorite Joker design, too. I think he told me that the other day.
Okay, but take that with a grain of salt, because DJ is not a Batman fan.
Oh, that's not like an insult to Dan.
No, I know that, but
DJ.
Let me finish, though. But DJ also doesn't know a lot of Batman stuff. Yeah, so when he says favorite, how many Jokers is he as familiar with as the rest of us? He doesn't look at Batman material. Like, there's a lot of movies he's just skipped. So that's all I'm saying, is that, like, this is the show he's most familiar with. So it's not surprising me that that's his favorite.
It's literally the only Batman thing he's ever heard of.
Yeah, and he was really disappointed when the movie wasn't just a direct adaptation of this. No, I'm kidding.
He was like, "What the heck? This isn't the Riddler. He's a fake."
John Kelling, Ming-Na Wen as Detective Yin is great here, and it's a shame she disappeared off the face of the earth after the season. I agree, and kind of weird that they write out her partner who becomes Clayface, and that whole thing is awesome, by the way, as a villain, and then she just kind of stops showing up.
I actually didn't realize that's who she was.
Yeah,
that's really cool.
She's great, and she's great and everything.
Not recognize her voice. That's awesome.
Oh, you didn't until just now. Yep.
Yeah.
That's who that is. Tom, $5 super chat. I've always assumed it works by having a hidden algorithm / malware in every building's burglar alarm system. I mean, you can make up whatever headcanon thing you want to, but at the end of the day, there's this device that goes off when crimes happen. Because the problem with that explanation...
Okay.
The problem with that explanation, Tom, for the Batwave is that Batman is constantly rushing off when the Batwave goes off to deal with things that the police don't know about. Like, constantly. He's the only person in the city that knows about it. You can't begin to explain that. What is tipping him off?
So basically, Batman found a race of precogs, and he kidnapped them. And they're buried under the Batcave, and they operate the Batwave. Oh
my god, that's dark. That's messed up. I mean, you're basically saying that Batman secretly rules Gotham through like Dark City logic.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Oompa Loompas, depending on how you want to look at it.
Well, they actually look like Oompa Loompas. The ones from the remake, not the original.
Unknown Passenger, I'm freaking terrible at riddles. I too am freaking terrible at riddles.
Then let me tell you about a good movie that you can follow along with. It's called Batman Forever.
Yep. If you're bad at riddles, that one will be more up your speed. Gotham has some of that too, where they'll just go for...
I don't know if I've gotten to a point where he becomes the Riddler.
Where they'll go to the most, oh boy. they'll go to the most obvious, easy kind of riddles, and then sometimes they'll do the 66 thing where it's like a thing that nobody could possibly figure out, but Gordon does because he's their Batman in that show, except he kills people.
So he's like most film versions of Batman.
Oh, in case I forget to mention it later, and I don't remember if he is the writer for this episode, but a name I saw a couple times.
Christopher Yost?
Christopher Yost wrote at least one of these.
He wrote our first two.
But what I was going to say is one of their lead writers on this show is a guy named Joseph Kerr, which is just hilarious to me because Joe Kerr is a alias very often for the Joker in comics.
Yeah, that's in Going Sane. I think, actually, Christopher Yost does this one and the next one, not the first two. But he only does like 3 or 4 episodes, and we're watching 2 of them? Yeah. Was one of them the zombie episode? No, I want to say it's this one in
Or was that a Joseph Kerr episode?
That might be a Joseph Kerr episode.
Okay, I mean, he's not winning this fight, but he's still more physical than some Riddlers.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But yeah, I like their characterization of him a lot.
No, it's really cool and very just classic Riddler. He's
a little bit more sadistic than he sometimes is.
Well, I think at this point I'm just so used to that because that's the kind of modern take on Riddler.
Yeah. But at this point, this was, believe it or not, one of the darker versions we'd had.
Oh yeah, no, at this point, this is like one of the first things, I guess, that would be doing that.
And see, this is another example of this chief just being a total idiot, not being able to put a thing together. Doesn't even realize that this is a riddle in the first place. And he says, "Why Yin?" And then Yin has to spell it out for him. Which she didn't even have to do. He would have just walked away because he's an idiot. And then she's like, Riddler says it just completely spells it out for him. And then he's like, well, wait, Batman wasn't even there, so you're off the hook. And she's like, yay!
No, he turns into Wolverine from 90s X-Men where he walks in and he's like, Where's Beast? He survived the blast. What about Morph? What? Well,
Morph!
and there's just like a minute of just silence before Wolverine puts it together.
AMC, the way Batman and Yin take down Riddler here is brilliant. Yeah, it's really good. And again, just interesting comparing it to how Batman beats Cluemaster.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, folks, we're going to go ahead and take a break now. And when we come back, we're going to watch our Season 3 episode for this evening, which is RPM, but not Power Rangers.
Yeah, it's not RPD.
Just an episode called RPM. That's a weird one. It'll be fun to watch that with you, Austin. That took me for a roller coaster. It's a very strange episode.
Very strange, yes, absolutely.
But several people asked for it. That was one, for whatever reason, people wanted us to look at. And the premise sounded so bizarre I had to know, which is why I picked it. And so yeah, I'll let you know on HBO Max where that is, because it's wrong again. I want to say it's season 2. Yeah, season 2, episode 5, according to HBO Max, even though it's season 3 episode. So everybody get that set up and a timestamp 0 while we're taking a break. We'll be back in about 5 minutes. And thanks again for tuning in. If anybody happens to pop in wondering where we are, why they're just seeing a title screen, just let them know that we'll be back in about 5 minutes. We're going to watch 3 more episodes of The Batman.
The Batman.
See you in a bit, folks.